3 days after the incident at Vexara Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The council chamber was a massive structure that floated in neutral space, accessible only by ship. Representatives from 70 different civilizations gathered to witness the proceedings. Yuna stood at the center of the chamber, still wearing her diplomatic uniform. The armor was gone, stored away on her ship. She looked like a normal ambassador again, calm and professional. But everyone in the room knew what she really was. To her right stood 6 representatives from civilizations that had suffered under King Vorath's rule. They were there to testify about his crimes. To her left stood Tay and Hana, officially her security escort, but now something more. They had seen behind the curtain, and that changed everything. King Vorath was brought in wearing prisoner restraints. He looked diminished somehow, without his throne and his guards. Just another criminal awaiting judgment. The council speaker, an ancient being from the eldest civilization, called the session to order. "We are here to address the incident at Vexara Prime and the charges against King Vorath. Ambassador Kim, you have submitted extensive evidence. Please summarize for the council." Yuna stepped forward. Her voice carried through the chamber without amplification. 3 days ago, King Vorath invited me to his palace under the pretense of diplomatic negotiations. His actual intent was assassination. He planned to kill me and my escorts as a message to humanity, threatening us into submission. She activated a holographic display. This is footage from the event. All of it was recorded and transmitted in real time to diplomatic channels throughout the galaxy. You can see the energy barriers he activated, the guards he positioned, and his explicit declaration of intent to execute a diplomatic ambassador. The footage played. Council members watched in silence. Some had already seen it, but watching it again in this formal setting made it more real, more damning. "However," Yuna continued, "I was prepared for this possibility. King Vorath failed to research who he was attempting to kill. He saw only a diplomat and assumed weakness. He didn't look into my background." "Because you hid it," Vorath interrupted angrily. "You deceived everyone." "I disclosed my military service in my official records," Yuna replied calmly. "The details were classified, but the fact of my service was not. Your intelligence failure is not my deception." The council speaker gestured for silence. "Continue, Ambassador." "I defended myself and my escorts. I subdued King Vorath's guards using non-lethal methods where possible. I then captured the king and contacted the appropriate authorities. The evidence speaks for itself." One of the council members, a reptilian being named Thex, spoke up. "Ambassador Kim, your actions were extraordinary. Some might say impossible for a single individual. There are concerns about what capabilities Earth possesses if one diplomat can defeat an entire royal guard." Yuna nodded. "Those concerns are valid. I will address them honestly. 20 years ago, Earth created a special operations program. We took volunteers and enhanced them with technology and training. The program produced 12 operatives. I was one of them." She paused to let that sink in. "Of those 12, 3 died in operations. 4 retired to civilian life after completing their service. 3 continued to work in various security capacities. And 2, including myself, became diplomats." "Why diplomats?" Thex asked. "Because we learned that while we could solve problems with force, lasting solutions required dialogue. We had the unique perspective of seeing what violence truly costs. We chose to use our skills to prevent conflicts rather than fight them." Another council member spoke, a gaseous being that communicated through a translation device. "You are known in certain circles as the Baba Yaga, a legend." "A ghost story," Yuna acknowledged. "That identity was part of my operational cover. The legend was useful because it made enemies reconsider their actions. Fear can prevent conflicts before they start." "But you killed hundreds," the being pressed. "The Karathi incident alone." "The Karathi leadership had committed genocide against 3 peaceful civilizations," Yuna interrupted. "They were planning to attack 7 more. Conventional military action would have resulted in billions of deaths. I was sent to remove their leadership and prevent the war." She looked directly at the gaseous being. "I didn't enjoy it. I didn't celebrate it. But I did what was necessary to save innocent lives. That's what the Baba Yaga program was designed for. Impossible missions that conventional forces couldn't accomplish." The 6 representatives from Vorath's victim civilizations stepped forward. The first was an elderly female from the planet Draxus. She spoke in a trembling voice. King Vorath conquered my world 17 years ago. He killed our ambassadors when they came to negotiate. He killed our leaders when they refused to submit. He killed millions of my people who resisted. One by one, the other representatives shared similar stories. Worlds destroyed, populations enslaved, resources stolen. A pattern of cruelty and oppression that spanned decades. When they finished, the council speaker turned to Vorath. "Do you dispute these testimonies?" "I was expanding my empire," Vorath said. "That is what strong civilizations do. The weak submit or perish, then you admit to these actions." "I admit to being a king, to ruling as kings rule." The council speaker looked at him with an expression that might have been disappointment. "The age of conquest through terror is ending, King Vorath. The galaxy has grown beyond such barbarism. You represent the past. Ambassador Kim represents the future. A future where humans pretend to be peaceful while hiding weapons among their diplomats?" Vorath shot back. "A future where strength is tempered by wisdom," the speaker corrected. "Where force is used only as a last resort. Where diplomacy is backed by the capability to defend oneself, but the preference is always for peaceful resolution." The council deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. King Vorath was found guilty of multiple war crimes, assassination attempts on diplomatic personnel, and crimes against sentient beings. His empire was dissolved. His holdings were redistributed to the civilizations he had oppressed. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. After the session ended, Yuna returned to her ship. Tay and Hana found her in her quarters, staring out at the stars. "Ambassador," Tay said quietly, "can we ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you really become a diplomat?" "The real reason." Yuna was silent for a moment. Then she spoke. "When I was the Baba Yaga, I was very good at my job. Too good. Every mission succeeded. Every target was eliminated. Every objective was achieved. But one day I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back." She turned to face them. "I had become a weapon, a tool. I could kill anyone, infiltrate anywhere, destroy anything. But I couldn't build. I couldn't create. I couldn't bring people together. All I knew was how to take apart." "So you chose diplomacy to balance it out?" Hana asked. "I chose diplomacy because I wanted to prove that I could be more than what I was created to be, that I could use words instead of weapons, that I could solve problems without violence." "But you had to use violence anyway," Tay observed. "Only because Vorath left me no choice. And even then I minimized casualties. Most of his guards will recover fully. I could have killed them all, but I chose not to. That's the difference between the old Baba Yaga and who I am now." Tay and Hana exchanged glances. Then Tay spoke. "We requested reassignment. We want to continue serving as your security detail." Yuna raised her eyebrows. "Why, you've seen what happens around me. It's dangerous." "Because you showed us something important," Hana said. "You showed us that being strong doesn't mean being violent, that having power means knowing when not to use it. We want to learn from you." Yuna smiled, the first genuine smile she'd shown in days. "Then I accept. But understand this. I hope you never see the Baba Yaga again. I hope the rest of my career is boring negotiations and peaceful agreements. But if something does happen," Tay asked, "then you'll be ready. I'll make sure of it." News of the trial spread throughout the galaxy faster than lightspeed communication. The footage of Yuna defeating the Royal Guard became the most watched recording in galactic history. Reactions varied by civilization. Some were frightened, realizing that humanity possessed capabilities they hadn't suspected. Others were impressed, recognizing that a species capable of such power but choosing diplomacy first was a valuable ally. Many were simply shocked that the legendary Baba Yaga had been real all along. But the most important reaction came from the smaller civilizations, the peaceful worlds that lived in fear of aggressive neighbors. To them, Yuna became a symbol, proof that justice could prevail, that bullies could be stopped. That peace was possible, but only when backed by the strength to defend it. Captain Soman Choi met with Yuna before the diplomatic ship departed. They had served together during the Karathi incident years ago. "The council is calling it the Vexara incident," Choi said. "They're using it as a case study in diplomatic protocol." "Great," Yuna said dryly. "Just what I wanted. To be a textbook example," Choi laughed. "You know what this means, right? Every negotiation you attend from now on, The other side will know who you really are. I know. The secret's out. I can never just be Ambassador Kim again. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Outside the throne room, Tay and Hana pressed their ears against the massive doors. They could hear crashes, weapon fire, and the sounds of something heavy hitting the walls. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes. Then silence fell. The doors opened slowly. Yuna walked out, her armor scorched in several places but still intact. Behind her, 40 royal guards lay unconscious on the floor. King Vorath knelt in the center of the room, his hands bound with his own royal banner. How? Tay breathed. Experience, Yuna said simply, and the fact that they've never fought anyone like me before. General Cross had watched everything from the security center. His claws trembled as he pulled up a communication channel to the other system defense forces. All ships, this is General Cross. We have a code black situation at the palace. The human ambassador is... The screen went blank. Then Yuna's face appeared on every monitor in the security center. General Cross, she said calmly, I know you're watching. I know where you are, and I need you to understand something very important. Cross stared at the screen in horror. How did you access our communication systems? The same way I've accessed everything else. General, I'm going to tell you a story. 12 years ago, there was a civilization called the Korathi. They were warmongers who believed in conquest through terror. They attacked 3 peaceful worlds and killed billions of civilians. She paused, her eyes cold. Earth sent me to deliver a message. I walked into their capital city alone. I passed through their security like it wasn't there. I reached their military command center, their political leadership, and their intelligence networks. In one night, I dismantled their entire power structure. The ghost of Korathi Prime, Cross whispered. The legend was real, very real. I left one survivor to tell the tale. A young officer who found his entire command dead when he returned from leave. He spread the story. And for 12 years, people have wondered if it was true or just a story to scare children. Yuna leaned closer to the camera. It was true, General, all of it. And right now I'm standing in King Vorath's palace. I've disabled your security. I've defeated your guards. And I've captured your king. The question is, what happens next? Cross found his voice. What do you want? I want you to contact the Galactic Council. Tell them everything that happened here. Tell them that King Vorath attempted to execute a diplomatic ambassador under false pretenses. Tell them that he has committed war crimes against multiple civilizations. And if I refuse, then I'll walk through this palace until I find you. And I'll do to your command structure what I did to the Korathi. The choice is yours, General. Peace or destruction. Cross looked around at his technicians. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. He had served under Vorath for 20 years. He had followed orders that led to the deaths of millions. He had watched his king commit atrocities and said nothing. But he wasn't a fool. He recognized when a battle was lost. I'll make the call, he said. Good choice, Yuna replied. The screens went blank. In orbit around Vexara Prime, 3 Terran warships had been waiting at the edge of the system. Now they received activation codes from Yuna's encrypted transmitter. The ships powered up their engines and began moving toward the planet. The commander of the lead ship, Captain Salman Choi, opened a channel to her crew. All hands, combat alert. The ambassador has signaled. Execute Protocol Baba Yaga. Protocol Baba Yaga was a contingency plan that few people in the Terran military even knew existed. It was designed for exactly this situation. An ambassador walks into a trap. The ambassador reveals their true identity. The warships provide support for extraction and prisoner transport. What made it unusual was that the protocol assumed the single ambassador would successfully capture or neutralize the entire enemy command structure before the ships even arrived, sir, the tactical officer said to Captain Choi. The protocol assumes Ambassador Kim would survive and complete her mission alone. Did command really believe one person could do all this? Choi smiled grimly. You've never heard the full stories about the Baba Yaga. I have. I was there during the Korathi incident. I was one of the officers who collected the survivors. What she did that night, she paused. Let's just say the protocol makes sense once you've seen her work. Back in the palace, Yuna had returned to the throne room where King Vorath was still kneeling. She pulled up a holographic display from her wrist device, showing him footage from throughout the palace. This is being broadcast to every diplomatic channel in the galaxy, she said. Every government, every news service, every intelligence agency. They're watching right now. Vorath's eyes widened. You can't, I can, and I am. They're seeing everything. The trap you set. The assassination attempt. The guards you deployed. All of it. She walked around him slowly. Do you know why I became a diplomat, Vorath? It wasn't because I was tired of fighting. It was because I was tired of people like you. Bullies who thought strength meant cruelty. Leaders who believed power came from fear. I am a king, Vorath snarled. You are nothing. I was something once, Una said quietly. Something terrible. The Baba Yaga wasn't just a fighter. She was a symbol. A message that humanity sent to the galaxy. We look weak, but we have teeth. We prefer peace, but we can wage war. She knelt down to meet his eyes. I killed hundreds of people in my career. Not because I enjoyed it, but because those people threatened innocent lives. They started wars. They committed genocide. They had to be stopped, and conventional methods wouldn't work. Then why did you stop? Vorath demanded. If you were so powerful, why become a diplomat? Because I learned something important. Violence only solves immediate problems. It doesn't build lasting peace. For that you need dialogue, understanding, compromise. She stood up. I hoped I could spend the rest of my life using words instead of weapons. But people like you make that impossible. Tay and Hana entered the room, followed by a medical team. They began treating the wounded guards, following Yuna's orders to provide care to everyone, regardless of their affiliation. Ambassador, Hana said, General Cross has contacted the Galactic Council. They're sending representatives. Good, Una said. She looked at Vorath again. You'll face trial for your crimes. Every world you've oppressed, every civilization you've harmed, they'll all have their say. Justice will be public and transparent. They'll never convict me, Vorath said. I have allies, resources. You had allies, Una corrected. But they've been watching this entire event unfold. They've seen how easily your defenses failed. They've seen one person dismantle your entire royal guard. Do you really think they'll risk associating with you now? She was right. Throughout the galaxy, leaders who had supported or feared Vorath were reconsidering their positions. The footage being broadcast showed something unprecedented. A single operative defeating an entire military force through skill, planning, and technology. But more importantly, it showed something else. It showed that humanity, despite appearing peaceful and diplomatic, possessed capabilities that rivaled any military power in the galaxy. The Baba Yaga had been a myth, a story, but myths that turn out to be real change everything. Captain Choi's ships entered orbit. Marines began landing at the palace, securing the area and taking custody of prisoners. Una watched from the throne room window as the operation proceeded smoothly. You planned all this, Vorath said bitterly. From the beginning. Yes, Una admitted. The Terran Coalition knew you would try to kill me. Your reputation is well established. We needed proof of your hostile intent. We needed the galaxy to see what kind of leader you really are. So you used yourself as bait. I volunteered, because I knew I could survive, and because diplomatic incidents like this needed to be resolved permanently, not just delayed. She turned from the window. You see, Vorath, this is the new reality. Humanity doesn't want war. We don't want conquest. We want to trade, to learn, to cooperate. But if you force our hand, if you threaten our people, you'll discover that we're not as weak as we appear. The Baba Yaga, Vorath said softly, is retired, Una finished, but never forgotten, and always ready if needed. The banquet hall became a battlefield. Una moved through the space like smoke, her body flowing from one position to another with practiced efficiency. Every movement served a purpose. Every action was calculated for maximum effect. A guard fired at her from the left. She was already moving, using a fallen table as cover. The energy beam scorched the air where she had been. Before the guard could fire again, Una threw the weapon she had taken from the first guard. It spun through the air and struck him in the head with enough force to crack his helmet. He dropped unconscious. 2 more guards rushed at her from different angles. Una waited until the last possible second, then dropped flat to the ground. The guards' shots crossed paths, hitting each other instead. They fell, their armor smoking. Una rolled forward, collecting their weapons as she moved. Behind the energy barrier, Tay and Hana watched in stunned silence. The woman they had escorted here was nothing like the calm diplomat from the ship. This was someone else entirely. Someone trained and enhanced for combat at a level they had only read about in classified reports. Is that really Ambassador Kim? Tay whispered. I don't know what that is. Hana replied, unable to look away. Yuna reached down and touched her diplomatic uniform. With a sharp pull, the outer layer tore away. Beneath it was adaptive armor, compressed so thinly it had been invisible under her clothes. The armor expanded and hardened, covering her torso, arms, and legs in matte black material that seemed to absorb light. She moved to the wall where Tay and Hana were trapped behind their barrier. Her fingers flew across a control panel that the guards had been using. The barrier flickered and died completely. "Stay behind me," Yuna said to them. Her voice was different now, still controlled, but with an edge of command that made them obey without thinking. "Ambassador, what?" Tay started to ask. "Not now," Yuna interrupted. "Get the civilians out." All the other ambassadors. "Get them to the landing bay. What about you?" Hana asked. "I need to have a conversation with King Vorath." More guards poured into the room from the side entrances. There were at least 20 of them now, all heavily armored and armed with military-grade weapons. They formed a line and began advancing, firing in coordinated patterns. Yuna grabbed Tay and Hana and pulled them behind a massive pillar. Energy beams carved chunks out of the stone, but the pillar was thick enough to provide cover. "Go," Yuna ordered. "Get them out." "That's a direct order." Tay wanted to argue, but something in her eyes made him nod. He and Hana ran toward the trapped ambassadors, helping them out of their disabled barrier fields and directing them toward the exit. Yuna stepped out from behind the pillar. She held a weapon in each hand now, taken from fallen guards. She fired both simultaneously, dropping 2 guards. Then she was moving again, using the chaos and smoke for cover. In the Palace Security Center, 3 floors above, General Cross watched the feeds from multiple cameras. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. One human woman was dismantling his elite guards, soldiers who had trained their entire lives for combat, warriors who had fought in dozens of campaigns across the galaxy. They fell before her like children. "Send all available units to the banquet hall," Cross ordered. "Lock down the palace. Activate all defensive systems." A technician looked up from his console. "General, I'm pulling up the file you accessed earlier. The one about the Baba Yaga, what does it say?" The technician read from the screen, his voice shaking. "Threat level maximum. Species human. Capabilities: enhanced reflexes, advanced combat training, expert in infiltration and elimination. Active operations 17 confirmed. Casualties inflicted unknown, estimated in thousands. Status retired, whereabouts unknown. Warning: if encountered, do not engage. Retreat and report to command immediately." "When was this file created?" Cross demanded. 12 years ago, sir, by the Karathi Intelligence Service. Before they were destroyed, Cross felt cold. The Karathi had been a powerful military civilization, feared across 3 sectors. They had mysteriously collapsed 12 years ago. Their leadership had been found dead, their military command structure destroyed, and their government dissolved within a month. No one knew exactly what happened. There were rumors of a ghost, a phantom that walked through their most secure facilities and eliminated anyone who threatened the peace accords. "She destroyed the Karathi," Cross whispered. "One person. She destroyed an entire civilization." On the screens, Yuna disabled another guard and moved toward the throne room. She wasn't running. She was hunting. In the banquet hall, the last few guards retreated. They had seen what happened to their companions and wanted no part of it. Yuna let them go. She didn't kill unless she had to. That was one of the rules she had set for herself when she was younger. Only eliminate those who directly threatened innocence or peace. Tay and Hana returned after getting the ambassadors to safety. They found Yuna standing in the center of the hall, surrounded by unconscious and wounded guards. None of them appeared to be dead, though many would need serious medical attention. "How did you do all this?" Tay asked. Yuna looked at him. For a moment, her expression softened. "A long time ago, Earth was new to the galaxy. We were weak and vulnerable. Other civilizations tried to take advantage of that weakness. So Earth created a program. They took volunteers and enhanced them, made them faster, stronger, smarter. They trained us to be weapons." "You were a soldier?" Hana said. "I was more than that. I was a ghost. I went places where armies couldn't go. I did things that couldn't be done officially. I ended 3 wars before they could start. I removed people who threatened billions of lives." She walked toward the throne room entrance. "But I got tired of killing, tired of being a weapon. So 12 years ago I retired. I became a diplomat. I thought I could use words instead of violence." It seems like you're still pretty good at violence, Tay observed. Yuna smiled sadly. Skills like these don't fade. But that doesn't mean I enjoy using them. They reached the throne room doors. They were sealed shut, reinforced with additional security systems. Yuna examined the locks and the energy barriers protecting them. The people who enhanced me, she continued. They gave me something special, implants that let me interact with electronic systems. I can access databases, hack security protocols, override controls. It's all running through my nervous system. She placed her hand on the control panel, her eyes unfocused for a moment as she connected with the palace's security network. Lines of code flashed behind her eyes, visible only to her. She found the back doors, the weaknesses, the exploits she had helped design years ago when she was part of the team that created counterintelligence measures against her own abilities. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had taught the galaxy how to protect itself from people like her, and now she was using that knowledge to break through those very protections. The door locks disengaged with a series of clicks. The energy barriers flickered and died. How did you do that so fast? Hana asked. Those are military-grade systems. I know, Yuna said. I helped design the security that was supposed to stop me. I know every weakness because I'm the one who told them where the weaknesses would be. She pulled the doors open manually, the servo motors having been disabled. Inside, King Vorath waited with 40 of his royal guard. They were the best warriors in his empire, chosen from thousands of candidates and trained since childhood. Vorath sat on his throne, his yellow eyes fixed on Yuna. You cannot win, he said. I have 40 guards. You are one person. Yuna stepped into the throne room. Behind her, Tay and Hana prepared to follow, but she raised her hand to stop them. Stay outside, she ordered. This won't take long. But, Tay protested. That's an order, Lieutenant Park. Tay stepped back reluctantly. He and Hana watched as Yuna walked into the throne room alone. The doors began to close behind her. Just before they shut completely, they heard her voice calm and cold. Tell me, King Vorath, have you ever wondered why they called me the Baba Yaga? In Old Earth mythology, Baba Yaga was a witch who lived in a house that walked on chicken legs. She helped those who deserved help and destroyed those who deserved destruction. She gave warnings. She gave chances. The doors closed completely, sealing Yuna inside with the king and his 40 best warriors. You gave me no choice. Her voice echoed from inside. So now you get to meet the real Baba Yaga. Then the sounds of combat began. The stars looked different from this distance. Ambassador Yuna Kim stood at the observation window of the Terran diplomatic vessel, watching the blue giant sun of the Vexara system grow larger. She was a woman in her mid-40s with short gray hair and calm brown eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. Her simple black diplomatic uniform was perfectly pressed, and her hands were steady as she held a data tablet. Behind her, 2 young officers were checking their equipment. Tay Park was 24 years old, fresh from the Terran Security Academy. He had nervous energy that made him check his weapon 3 times in the past hour. Hana Lee was 23, quieter than her partner, but her hands also moved to her sidearm repeatedly. They were both assigned as security escorts for this mission, and neither of them had ever left Earth's solar system before this week. Ambassador Kim, Tay said, his voice tight. Are you worried at all? Yuna turned from the window and smiled gently. About what exactly? About King Vorath, Hana answered. Everyone knows his reputation. He's killed ambassadors from other worlds before, 3 in the past 5 years. Yuna nodded slowly. I'm aware of his history. That's why the Terran Coalition chose me for this mission. Tay frowned. But you're a diplomat. Shouldn't they have sent soldiers? Or at least more security? Sometimes words work better than weapons, Yuna said. Besides, I've met worse than King Vorath. The young officers exchanged glances but said nothing more. They had read Ambassador Kim's official file. She had been a diplomat for 12 years with a perfect record. Before that, there was a gap in her history. The file simply said, classified military service and nothing else. Most diplomats came from political families or academic backgrounds. Yuna Kim's past was a mystery. The ship's computer announced their arrival at Vexara Prime in 30 minutes. Yuna returned to her small cabin and sat down at the desk. She opened a locked drawer and removed a small silver object that looked like a diplomatic seal. She pressed it against her palm and it vibrated once, syncing with her biosignature. Then she attached it to her uniform collar where it looked like an ordinary decoration. In the mirror, she studied her reflection. The woman looking back at her seemed calm and professional. But behind those calm eyes, old memories stirred. Memories she had buried 12 years ago when she decided to stop being a weapon and start being a voice for peace. On Vexara Prime, inside a palace that stretched across 12 kilometers of armored buildings, King Vorath sat on his throne. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall with obsidian scales covering his body and yellow eyes that glowed in the dim light. His species, the Vexari, were natural predators. They had conquered 12 star systems through brutal military campaigns. General Cross stood beside the throne. He was smaller than the king, but still twice the size of a human, with dark red scales and multiple scars across his face. "The human ship will dock in 20 minutes, my lord." "Good," Vorath said, his voice like grinding stones. "Have you prepared everything?" "Yes, my lord. The reception hall is ready. Energy barriers are installed. My guards are in position. Once the ambassador enters, we will activate the barriers and execute her along with her escorts." Vorath leaned back in his throne. "The humans are weak. They think words and treaties matter. They came to this galaxy only 50 years ago, and they still believe in peace." He laughed, a terrible sound that made the servants in the room flinch. "When we kill their ambassador, they will learn their place. They will submit or be destroyed," General Cross bowed. "What about the trade agreement they want to discuss?" "There will be no agreement. There will only be a message sent back to Earth. A message written in the blood of their diplomat." In the palace's lower levels, servants and minor officials whispered among themselves. Many of them were from conquered worlds, forced to serve the Vexari king. They had heard rumors about what would happen to the human ambassador. Some felt pity, others felt nothing anymore. They had seen too much cruelty to feel anything. One elderly servant, a female from the planet Draxus, remembered when ambassadors from her world came to negotiate with Vorath. They had been tortured and killed, and the recordings were sent back to Draxus as a warning. Within a month, her planet surrendered completely. She wondered if the same fate awaited this human woman. The Terran diplomatic vessel docked smoothly at the palace's landing bay. Yuna walked down the boarding ramp with Tay and Hana following closely behind. A group of Vexari guards waited for them, each one armed and armored. The leader of the guards, a captain with silver markings on his scales, gestured for them to follow. They walked through massive corridors lined with trophies from conquered worlds. Weapons, flags, and artifacts hung on the walls like prizes. Tay's hand moved toward his weapon, but Yuna shook her head slightly. He understood and relaxed his hand. The throne room doors were 10 meters tall and made of some dark metal. They opened slowly, revealing a vast hall filled with alien dignitaries. At least 200 beings from dozens of species stood in organized rows on either side of a long walkway. At the far end, King Vorath sat on his throne looking down at the approaching humans. Yuna walked forward calmly, her steps steady and measured. Tay and Hana walked behind her, their eyes scanning the room for threats. They noticed that many of the alien dignitaries looked uncomfortable. Some wouldn't meet their eyes. Others stared at them with what looked like pity. When they reached the center of the hall, Yuna stopped and bowed slightly. "King Vorath, I am Ambassador Yuna Kim of the Terran Coalition. I bring greetings from Earth and hope for peaceful dialogue between our peoples." Vorath stared at her in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Welcome, Ambassador Kim. I have been expecting you." His voice carried across the hall, and Yuna heard something in it that made her muscles tighten instinctively. It was the tone of a predator playing with prey. "I appreciate your hospitality," Yuna replied. "Shall we begin our negotiations?" "Of course," Vorath said, showing his teeth in what might have been a smile. "First we will have a reception dinner. Then we will discuss the future relationship between your people and mine." Yuna nodded. "That sounds acceptable." General Cross stepped forward. "Please follow me to the banquet hall. Your escorts may accompany you." As they turned to follow the general, Yuna's hand brushed against the silver seal on her collar. It was barely noticeable, just a brief touch. But the device recorded everything, scanning the room's layout, counting the guards, analyzing the energy signatures in the walls. All of this information was being transmitted in encrypted bursts to the Terran ship in orbit. Tay leaned close to Hana and whispered, "Something feels wrong." Hana nodded. "I know, too many guards. And did you see how the other ambassadors looked at us? Like they were attending a funeral, Tay said quietly. Neither of them knew how right they were. This was supposed to be a funeral. Their funeral. But what King Vorath didn't know was that he had just made the worst mistake of his long life. He had invited Death into his palace, and Death was wearing the face of a middle-aged human diplomat who seemed calm and harmless. Death had many names across the galaxy. But 12 years ago, in the darker corners of known space, Death had one name that made hardened criminals and warlords flee in terror. They called her the Baba Yaga. The banquet hall was a display of wealth and power. Long tables stretched across the room, covered with food from a dozen different worlds. Crystal containers held liquids that glowed in strange colors. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows, and massive pillars carved with battle scenes supported the structure. Yuna sat at the main table with King Vorath to her right and General Cross to her left. Tay and Hana stood behind her, trying to look professional while their hands stayed close to their weapons. Around the room, over 100 alien dignitaries sat at their own tables, eating slowly and talking in quiet voices. "Tell me about Earth," Vorath said, breaking a piece of meat with his claws. "I have heard it is a small world with only one intelligent species. Earth is our home," Yuna replied calmly. "And yes, humanity is the only species that evolved there. But we've learned much since reaching the stars 50 years ago." 50 years, Vorath repeated with amusement. "My people have ruled space for 3,000 years. You are children playing at politics." "Perhaps," Yuna said, taking a sip of water. "But even children can surprise their elders." Vorath laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Indeed, sometimes children must be taught harsh lessons." Around the room, Yuna noticed details that troubled her. The guards were positioned at every exit, more than necessary for a simple diplomatic dinner. The other ambassadors ate mechanically, their faces showing resignation rather than enjoyment. Several times she caught aliens glancing at her with expressions that looked like guilt or sadness. General Cross cleared his throat. "Ambassador Kim, perhaps we should begin discussing the trade agreement your government proposed." "I would be happy to," Yuna said. She pulled out a small data pad from her jacket. "The Terran Coalition wishes to establish mineral trade routes through Vexari space. In exchange, we offer advanced medical technology and agricultural techniques that could benefit your colony worlds." She projected a holographic display above the table, showing trade routes, resource data, and economic projections. It was a fair deal, one that would benefit both sides. As she explained the details, Yuna watched Vorath's face carefully. He wasn't listening. His eyes had a distant look, like someone waiting for an event to begin. Behind her, Tay shifted his weight nervously. He had counted at least 40 guards in the room, all heavily armed. The exits were blocked. The windows were too high and probably reinforced. If something went wrong, they were trapped. Yuna finished her presentation and deactivated the hologram. "These are our initial terms. Of course, we're open to negotiation and adjustment based on your needs." King Vorath set down the piece of meat he had been eating. He wiped his claws on a cloth and stood up. The room immediately fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every movement ceased. The tension became thick enough to touch. "Ambassador Kim," Vorath said loudly, his voice carrying across the entire hall, "I have considered your proposal." "And?" Yuna asked, though she already knew what was coming. "I reject it completely." Yuna nodded slowly. "May I ask why?" "Because humanity has nothing to offer the Vexari Empire except submission. You came to this galaxy thinking you could negotiate as equals. You were wrong." Around the room, guards moved to attention. Yuna heard the sound of weapons being activated. Energy weapons hummed with power. Tay and Hana drew their pistols, backing closer to Yuna. "This is a diplomatic mission," Yuna said calmly. "An attack on an ambassador is an act of war under galactic law." "Galactic law is written by the strong," Vorath replied, "and enforced by the powerful. Your people are neither." He raised his hand, and something happened that confirmed all of Yuna's suspicions. Energy barriers flickered into existence around the room. Transparent walls of crackling force separated Yuna from Ty and Hana. Similar barriers trapped the other ambassadors at their tables. The entire event had been planned in advance. "You will die here," Vorath continued, "and your body will be sent back to Earth in pieces. This is the message I send to humanity. Submit to Vexari rule or face extinction." Tay shouted and fired his weapon at the energy barrier, But the shots were absorbed harmlessly. Hana did the same with identical results. They were separated from Yuna by a wall they couldn't break through. 10 guards moved forward, their weapons aimed at Yuna. She remained seated, her hands folded calmly on the table. She looked at each guard, then at General Cross and finally at King Vorath. "Before you do this," Yuna said quietly, "I need to ask you one question." Vorath laughed again. "You wish to beg for your life?" "No," Yuna said. "I want to know if you've done your research. Do you know who I am?" The king waved his hand dismissively. "You are Ambassador Yuna Kim of the Terran Coalition, diplomat, negotiator, weakling." "That's my current title," Yuna agreed. "But before I became a diplomat, I had a different profession and a different name." Something in her voice made General Cross pause. He had lived long enough to recognize danger when he heard it. And there was something in this human's tone that triggered old instincts. "My lord, perhaps we should—" "Silence," Vorath commanded. "Guards, execute her now." The 10 guards raised their weapons. Yuna stood up slowly from her chair. Her movements were precise and controlled. She reached up to her collar and touched the silver seal she wore there. "I was hoping I wouldn't need to do this," she said. "I've spent 12 years trying to be someone different. Someone better. I became a diplomat because I was tired of violence. Tired of killing." The guards' fingers moved to their triggers. "But you've left me no choice," Yuna continued. Her voice was still calm, but now it carried a weight that made several aliens in the room shiver with instinctive fear. "I haven't used my other name in 12 years. I was really hoping to keep it that way." "Enough of this," Vorath snarled. "Kill her." The guards fired. Energy beams crossed the space where Yuna had been standing. But she was no longer there. She had moved with speed that seemed impossible for a human her age. One moment she was standing still. The next she was 3 meters to the left, her body low to the ground. The guards adjusted their aim and fired again. Yuna rolled forward, her movements smooth and practiced. She came up beside the nearest guard and her hand shot out. There was a crack of bone and the guard dropped his weapon. Before he could react, Yuna struck him twice more. Once in the throat, once behind the head. The massive alien warrior collapsed like his strings had been cut. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The other guards stared in shock. Around the room, aliens who had been watching with resignation now leaned forward with surprise and something that might have been hope. Yuna picked up the fallen guard's weapon and looked at King Vorath. Her face was still calm, but her eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of a diplomat. They were the eyes of a predator, cold and calculating. "Let me properly introduce myself," she said. "My name is Yuna Kim. But in certain circles across certain dark corners of this galaxy, I'm known by another name." She touched the seal on her collar again, and it pulsed once. The energy barrier separating her from Tay and Hana flickered and died. Throughout the room, other barriers began to fail as well. The electromagnetic pulse from her seal was designed to disrupt Vexari security systems. It had cost the Terran Coalition billions to develop and required classified technology that officially didn't exist. General Cross stared at her with growing horror. He pulled up a datapad and began searching frantically through security files. "They used to call me the Baba Yaga," Yuna said softly. The weapon in her hand spoke, and another guard fell. She moved again, impossibly fast, and 2 more guards went down before they could track her movement. General Cross found the file he was looking for. His face went pale under his scales. "My lord," he whispered. "Retreat. Retreat now," but it was too late. The trap had been sprung. But the predator and prey had switched places.